Hi, HRN listeners. We're celebrating our 15th anniversary, and we have a really fun campaign and an ask for you. This 15th anniversary tour is aiming to bring you closer to unique food and music experiences in some of the most exciting cities in America. All the while, we're raising funds to support our work empowering the next generation of food systems storytellers through our fellowship programs. Here's how it works. Donate to HRN and be entered into a raffle in the city of your choice to win a dinner for two at a noteworthy restaurant and tickets for two to a concert at a prominent local venue. We have incredible partners in New York, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, Nashville, Las Vegas, Charleston, Asheville, and Ardmore, Pennsylvania, who have donated a meal for two and two tickets to a concert of the winner's choice. And all donations help fund our fellowship programs, where we're helping to build essential workforce readiness skills and food system storytelling skills. Check out heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. That's heritageradionetwork.org/15. Thank you.
This episode is brought to you by Roberta's, home of Heritage Radio Network for 10 years. Learn more about Roberta's at robertaspizza.com.
Hey, welcome to Beer Sessions Radio on Heritage Radio Network. It's Tuesday, January 25th, 2022. And we've got a special group of guests on today. We're going to be talking about homebrewing and the American Homebrewers Association. So let's go around the room and introduce everyone. Let's start with Julia.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for listening to this amazing show. I'm a total fan of Jimmy and everything going on with all the work here, talking about beer and culture. I am talking from Lyons, Colorado, which is my home, a little bit outside of Boulder, Colorado, where the American Homebrewers Association offices are. And I'm proud to be the new executive director.
All right. Congratulations. And Jeff?
I'm Jeff Lyons with Endless Life Brewing in Brooklyn, New York.
And Ethan?
Hey, it's Ethan Cox here. I'm owner and co-founder of Community Beer Works, and I'm talking to you from Buffalo, New York.
All right. So, Julia, with your new position, this is a very special time because, 10, 12 years ago, it seemed that the homebrewers were such an important part of the conversation. And then we had a huge explosion of craft breweries in America. So just give us your quick background. You worked at the Brewers Association a long time and what you're doing now and how they tie together.
Sure. When you refer to the Brewers Association, Jimmy, if people don't know, that's the national not-for-profit trade group that represents the majority of breweries in the United States. The Brewers Association, in many forms, has been around since 1979, when it started as the American Homebrewers Association. So Brewers Association not only represents professional brewing and exists to promote and protect small and independent craft brewers, their beers and the community of brewing enthusiasts, but also has the AHA. And I started in this whole beer biz as a home brewer. I am a geeky home brewer at heart, 12-gallon stainless kettle system with Cajun cookers out to my patio. And I've been brewing since the 90s, have a national homebrew competition, silver medal for Old Ale under my belt. I've won for a fruited stout in BJCP or beer judge certification competitions, etc. And so the organization on a national level is helping brewers, and Jeff and Ethan can talk to us about that in many ways that were never predicted because of the pandemic, but also still continually doing institutional work in terms of advocating for legislative and regulatory successes to allow legal home brewing and, legal brewing, and then tax relief and small business relief to today's brewers so they can fight the good fight, in a market that's dominated by large global international conglomerate brewers. And so today, my charge as executive director of the AHA is to really kind of be a voice and an advocate for the hobby that I already love. And I wear a hose clamp on my finger that I show you in this Zoom call, for more than 10 years representing the hobby of homebrewing and how rewarding it is. And it teaches me about myself. It brings me closer to others. teaches me history, it teaches me geography, it teaches me culture, it teaches me to be more in touch with agricultural ingredients. So I really love being a brewer, and this year, 2022, is all about bringing home brewing to the masses in even a more robust way, and I'm pleased as punch to be leading the charge.
All right. So just as a good starting point, Julia, what came first, home brewing or craft brewing?
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Well, if you talk to historians, and I am not one, Jimmy, we were in, Mesopotamic, if I'm even pronouncing that right, cultures, Mesopotamia and whatnot, brewing, right? And you have traces of barley that had been fermented and converted, grapes and also honey, so mead, in the earliest fermented beverages. But beer was in the mix, certainly in the beginning on the homebrew level, right? Early man and woman were brewing, and that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. They were not selling it yet. They might have used it for barter, right? For trade, especially in Egypt and whatnot. Troops over time have been paid in beer for their rations and whatnot. And then after, the Middle Ages and hops really came on the scene too, you went from gruit ales to hopped beers, and also much more globally, the commercial side of brewing came to be. And so in the U.S., after Prohibition, then you really get to small brewers that kind of picked up the baton from the small brewers in the late 1800s. We had 4,100 breweries in the late 1800s. Then you have Prohibition, 1920 to 1933. Then you have Abysmal era, where really in 1978, we had only gotten back to less than 100 brewing companies. Today, you have almost 9,000. And so you have a very prolific advanced brewing scene in the U.S. You also have 1 million plus one homebrewers, 1.1 million people homebrew beer. 37,000 of them are members of the American Homebrewers Association. And so it's no longer a what is first or a chicken and the egg, more so is what you would bring the conversation to, because a lot of brewers, and I'll let my brethren talk now, they're homebrewing to kind of go pro too, and they're tinkering in the kitchen on that first batch to then brew it up on the pilot system to then make it go commercial and brew it more broadly. So a lot of homebrewing still today touches the innovation and experimentation of what's going on the commercial side.
Yeah. And before I go to them, I just want to ask you, just in specifics of some of your goals. You said there's over 1 million homebrewers, 37,000 members. What do you want to know about these people? Because some of them might brew once a year, some are brewing every week. What are some of your goals running the organization now?
Yeah, it's to continue to have homebrewing be relevant in your mind. Also to be kind of your resource and accountability buddy on the national level. We're here to prompt you, to remind you it's Big Brew in May. The biggest batch of beer made every year is run by the American Homebrewers Association, with thousands of people brewing one batch of beer in their own individual locations and giving you reasons to brew so you can keep, your hands kind of in the brew kettle all year long. That's definitely one of the goals. Also, Jimmy, Jeff and Ethan, you can reinforce this, but a lot of today in what came along in craft brewing, we don't want to get to that wine side and have beer become too complex, too intimidating, too unapproachable. And so it's to keep on the home brewing level for anyone that wants to not just drink beer, but brew it, keep the understanding that it can be very simple. If you can make soup, you can make beer. There are kits out there that I've even been brewing with that make world-class beer that are very quality. You don't have to do all grain like a commercial brewer, or you can. And then you start to geek out and get more science-minded and, evil scientists or mad scientists and chemistry-minded. But to keep the intimidation factor out of it, we want to remind people that their recipes are there, clone recipes for commercial brews. You want to brew your favorite beer from down the street, there's recipes for that, or you want to create your own version, or you want to brew classic styles. That's all there resource-wise, recipe-wise through the American Homebrewers Association and many other amazing resources out there.
Yeah. Let's go to Ethan. Ethan, a little intro on you and, your journey. I met you through a New York State event several years ago. The governor was there. You make some beers like the Whale, which is one of my favorites in New York State.
Thanks.
Tell us about you.
Well, it ties back to what Julia was saying. I came through the ranks of homebrewing. To me, when I discovered that through my stepbrothers, actually, that beer wasn't something that you had to buy at the supermarket, but rather you could just make it, sort of blew my mind, especially my not yet 21 mind. So my route was through homebrewing. And, also through the formal structure of homebrewing, I became BJCP certified and became a homebrewing judge and helped organize homebrewing competitions, everything from the steward level to the judging level to actually running the entire shebang by the time I was done, and actually served as president of our homebrew club for a little while. So I think homebrewing is still very, very vital. And it's nice to see that there's still that exchange from homebrewing to craft and then, back to homebrewing.
Yeah.
Went on to parlay that into founding Community Beer Works. We started making beer in 2012. So we're coming up on a decade, which puts us squarely in the, as you were kind of saying, we got started right at the end of sort of or maybe the middle of the golden age of craft beer. And we stuck it out through the difficulties associated with the pandemic and everything else. Still going strong almost 10 years later.
Thanks for coming on. We're going to talk about a lot today.
Yeah.
Let's get Jeff on too. So Jeff, I met you as a home brewer, and you were part of some homebrew clubs. So tell us about you.
Yeah, absolutely. Very similar to Ethan, very similar to most brewers who are going to tell you their story. It definitely all started at home. Buy a kit and try your hand at it and just become completely enamored with it and go down the rabbit hole. The one thing I'd like to sort of emphasize that Julia was getting at, or tangentially, I probably didn't start homebrewing for 9 months or a year after I thought I might want to do it, just because I was intimidated by the potential depth of the science that was necessary. And sort of what she was saying is that there are kits out there that are so easy that if you're intimidated by that, I'd encourage you to just jump right in. If you can make food at home, if you can cook at a very basic level, you can definitely make beer. And, now I'm well into the science and eager to learn more, but, it intimidated me up front, and I'd just like to encourage everybody to jump in if they have the inkling. But yeah, it was your back room at Jimmy's 43 where we were doing BJCP classes, and you've been a huge steward for the homebrew community. But yeah, it's still we moved our Brooklyn Bruisers, one of the homebrew clubs in New York, to Endless Life once we got open. And within a couple months of being open, we hosted a homebrew event where we had probably a dozen or so homebrewers pouring beers in our space. So it's definitely still have a foot and a heart in that community, and try to keep the two going hand in hand.
Yeah. Hey, Julia. So with American Homebrew Association, just tell us about the role that Charlie Papazian played in that. And then also, why did homebrewers start making competitions? Like, where did that come from?
Sure. I don't have an intimate knowledge of the beer judge certification program start dates for competitions, but I'll go with the latter of the two first and then talk about amazing Charlie Papazian. The Great American Beer Festival in its early day basically started kind of as a homebrew competition. And that was in the early 80s. And then it evolved into a professional competition. So Charlie Papazian, founder of the Great American Beer Festival, and then also founder of the American Homebrewers Association, really, by the way, is 20 minutes as I point to the south of me, and really still a big force in what he did and does do for homebrewing and professional brewing. If you want to talk about kind of the godfather of brewing, not just homebrewing, it really is Charlie and some of the people that he was hanging out with to do things like in 1978, get Jimmy Carter to legalize homebrewing and allow up to 200 US gallons per family household to be legal, that then, we started to all run with and brew. And in Charlie's era in 1979, to celebrate the information that people were wanting and to satisfy the thirst for that on homebrewing, he started publishing Zymergy magazine, which is still published today and part of American Homebrewers Association membership. You get it every other month if you're a member. So Charlie has done so many things to really see as a visionary what was needed. And one of the things he was inspired by was the Great British Beer Festival. And so when he saw that and he came back and there were fledgling brewers, like a Garrett Oliver at Manhattan Brewing Company at the time and not even at Brooklyn yet, or a Fritz Maytag who really started his work for Anchor in the late 60s and got going in the 70s, or a Sierra Nevada that really got its kick going in the 1980s. They needed a place to compete against each other, to learn about brands that they were in the market against, to get judging going so they could get quality feedback. And still to this day, we're getting ready to have National Homebrew Competition in Pittsburgh, the week of June 20th. And I invite anyone that wants to enter the kind of Super Bowl of homebrewing, enter the NHC. And you will, get feedback from beer judge certification, certified or higher judges, or World Beer Cup and Great American Beer Festival judges. And you will get judged and scored, in a way, and comments in a way that is different than any other beer judge certification program type of competition. So that's a lot. I would also answer that, homebrew competitions are a great place to not only get the comments to improve your recipes, but also to then get motivated to brew that same beer again and refine it. And that's how restaurants, construct their menu. Their menu is not constructed from the first dish that they figure out to put on paper. They make it, they get feedback again and again, and then they home run it, and then they offer it on the menu.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask Ethan too. So when you were first, home brewing and coming a brewer, was there a moment that you hit this learning curve, like an aha moment, or was there a certain recipe that you made that the lights went off for you?
Oh, absolutely. I started with the gentle introduction of a kit as well, and did that for quite some time before moving to my first all grain batches. And, it was a long time before I went from that to, try to do things like lagers, which are a little bit more difficult at the homebrew scale sometimes if you don't have temperature control. But I think the first time I made a beer that was so good that everybody else also thought it was good, as opposed to just me. That was a pretty nice moment. That's really the feedback you're kind of looking for. You got 5 gallons of it after all, so you do want some help. And when other people were like, "Hey, that's actually pretty good," that changes things for you, and you're like, "Pretty good? I bet I can make it very good, or even better than that." So at that point, you start to say, "Well, what do I have to do to actually make that so that you think it's even better than pretty good?" And that's when you start going down the rabbit hole that Jeff kind of mentioned, like, oh, well, what are the little smaller tips and tricks that I need to know to really nail that? So, yeah. Yeah.
And then, Julia, as your new role as executive director of American Homebrew Association, what are some of your goals? Like, I know that, are you trying to help diversify homebrewing? What are some of the bigger picture goals that you think you can achieve in this job?
Sure. I want to take the world-class resources that are already available through homebrewersassociation.org and American Homebrewers Association membership and make sure that anyone that has taken the time to join or was a member in the past, to have them, utilize those resources, contribute to the resources. And then also to, expand the audience. Part of the intimidation factor that we talked about earlier isn't just on the act of homebrewing, which can be as hard as trying to, if I wanted to start paragliding or birding or knitting, that's kind of intimidating too, right? And so I want to take the intimidation factor out of the how to brew, but also the why we brew. And a lot of people want to brew or spend time with and learn from people that we identify with. And so I want to make sure that all walks of life are homebrewing and mentoring others. And I think that's a great place to start. So, you know, we don't only have 37,000 homebrew members and 1.1 million homebrewers. We have tens of millions of homebrewers, and we have, you know, hundreds of thousands of members. So slowly and steady reminding in the conversation when beer comes up and you talk about homebrewing, that the national organization is there. Many free resources are there too. But if you want to really dial in for less than $50, you know, join us and be a part of a community that's ready to geek out with you, that's ready to talk in any form, most time, any time of day, to take your hobby further, so you are less frustrated and more successful.
So if I join, do I get the Zymergy magazine?
Yes, you definitely do, for sure. And I think that it's funny because I'm just seeing a chat from Ethan. I wrote a poem, you know, the joys of Esther's. I was very poetic mode that day. I'd have to find that, Ethan, but like, here's the poetry of beer. Thank you for triggering that. Look, if I'm homebrewing, you know what's going on right now? I've got a homebrew carboy, 5 gallons, bubbling away in my favorite t-shirt next to my bed in my bedroom because it's warmer in my bedroom. So I'm going to ferment my ale, and there's Jeff showing us that 5-gallon carboy in his office or room. And when I see that day in and day out, I am much more connected with that batch of beer. It's also listening to the music I listen to, the frequencies, the vibrations are talking to that yeast. I am smelling, you know, the excess of CO2 that is expelling out of that carboy. And then I'm already starting to plot. Am I going to keg it? Am I going to bottle it? And then I get back to the romance of once I do that and taste it at every step of the way and take gravity readings, I'm really saying, should I bump this up with some fruit now? Should I barrel age it? Throw in some wood chips? Should I just bring it into the office and get everybody to drink it because it's fresh? And hey, I've got somebody that's having a wedding soon and I'm going to give them gifts. That's the type of poetry and beauty of homebrewing, that it's once you brew on that day, you've got weeks of, you know, interaction with something that you created, like immaculate fermentation is what I call it, right? And mother, you know, nature brings us yeast that then eats the sugar, secretes alcohol and CO2. And we get to be vehicles in that process. That's some of the romance and poetry behind homebrewing.
Wow. It sounds like its own religion in a good way. That was a great question, Ethan. Jeff, we might as well ask some more questions of Julia since she's not going to stay too long. Jeff?
Oh, man, I have so many. You've got me all fired up. I want to go like mash in right now.
Totally. I agree.
Fire
what are
up
you going
the
to do?
stove.
What are you going to make?
Let's go. Oh, I've actually been in the process. I haven't brewed so much at home over the past 6 or 12 months. I've been insanely busy with getting my own project off the ground, but I do still brew at home. I still identify as a home brewer. And what I showed you was one of the lambic style, like spontaneous beers that I've made. I've been going through those over the past week, trying to see what they've been neglected. So I'm trying to see what's still good and what can be blended and saved and what needs to just see the drain. But yeah, no, I don't know. So many questions for Julia. I don't know. Ethan, jump in. Do you have anything?
Well, one of the things that I've noticed about homebrewing as it's evolved over all these years is that when I started, there were maybe 10 grains you could buy, possibly 20 hops, maybe all of 3 yeasts. And now, really anything that a commercial brewer can buy, a home brewer can buy. So what's next? Like what more could a home brewer want or expect on down the road in terms of ingredients or equipment or process?
I love that question, Ethan. And one of the talks that I want to prepare is what's hot in home brewing. And I'm going to use my travels across the U.S. and also the ability to survey American Homebrewers Association members to tell me what's hot. Mm-hmm. But you bring to mind that homebrewing wasn't always as easy to do as it was to commercially brew because you would have to buy things in such big batches. Right now, it's still really hard to can, for example, if you're a home brewer, right? But in the early days, there were, suppliers or ingredient suppliers like Brew, where they took a stand and said, we're not just going to make, malt for professional brewers. We're going to account for home brewers and sell in smaller quantities. You had companies like White Labs, right? The yeast, we could then pitch at the right quantities and only buy it for $5 or $10 of, a bag, instead of having to buy a huge amount that professional brewers would buy for hundreds of dollars and use that, 8, 10 generations at a time. So I think we're kind of past that era, except for in packaging. I'd love to see homebrewers get more options on that level. And I often think about, too, the safety side of things. You can't just go willy-nilly. When you're homebrewing, you really are kind of in a manufacturing facility, and, you should be wearing gloves and eyewear and boots that are heat proof in case you spill. There's a lot of things that have happened to professional brewers and homebrewers. So safety comes to mind in advancing homebrewers' ability to just check the list and know what they're doing to safely homebrew. Mm-hmm. I love that. And then, I just was in Chicago spending time with Randy Mosher and Ray Daniels, two of my mentors, two of the first I went to after Charlie Papazian and Gary Glass, and said, now that I'm at the helm of homebrewing, what should I be doing to help bring homebrewing forth? And, they both had really good insight. But one of the things that came up when it talks about beer styles is that homebrewers have really helped establish pretty much every beer style out there. Not just the typical example, if you hang in the circles enough to, have followed the history, like American brown ale. That came along because of homebrewers in Texas and Charlie Papazian and Fred Eckhart and people like that experimented with an English style and brought it to a maltier place and really kind of, evolved it and made it American. A lot of that, has gone on. And so most of the beer styles today have really been born in kitchens, and that's still happening. I don't know what homebrewers are going to brew next. I'd love for you all to tell me.
Go, Ethan, you stick with it because you're doing great.
Well, Julia mentioned something near and dear to my heart, and you actually mentioned this at the opening of the show. The whale is a brown ale, and it's a brown ale that 100% was born out of a homebrew recipe, not my own, but CBW's original brewer, a guy named Rudy Watkins. And it was inspired by, I think, Randy Mosher's book, because I think he was bemoaning the fact that people didn't use Fawcett brown malt very much. And he was like, well, let's build a recipe around Fawcett brown malt. And the whale, to this day, to me, really is a liquid poem to Fawcett brown malt. That's what it is.
Jeff, you ready? You had a question?
What you were talking about all the styles that have been revived or invented by homebrewers. What are some of with the newest edition of the BJCP guidelines? What are some of the newer ones that you're excited about, or that you feel that homebrewers are excited by?
So now you're really testing me, because first of all, the great Beer Judge Certification Program just announced new beer style guidelines for 2021. And my dog is telling me it's time to wrap up real quick. So I'll try to finish my sentence. So I'm not going to be able to answer that question, but I will say on the beer style guidelines, that's one of the indicative places to find the trends, is look at the beer styles, look at what's entered the National Homebrew Competition, look at what brewers are entering in Great American Beer Festival, the numbers of entries and how things evolve. And then you're going to start to see, the emerging style that then finally gets recognized. Like Brut IPA did get added in the 2021 BJCP new styles. How many years did that take? And frankly, that's after the big curve of Brut IPAs. Maybe they'll come back strong, but possibly not in the way that they were 3 or 4 years ago. So style guidelines are always going to be a step behind because they take their time to have something be established before you would definitely put it into being a style. So I think, Jeff, I love that question, and give me this year to try to answer that in a better, prolific way as I hang in kitchens and patios all across the U.S. and hang out and brew. And maybe I'll get lucky enough to brew with the three of you.
Oh, yeah.
That'd be great.
We'll cook something up. I think we're going to talk about that as soon as you step off. So
yeah, you're welcome in Buffalo
right.
anytime, Julia.
All right, Ethan and Jeff, let's plot something with Jimmy on a recipe, and I'll let you know when I'm coming to New York. And Jimmy, I got to bounce so you can get to the rest of your show with these guys. Thank you for the opportunity. Just want to say happy brewing to everyone out there. And it's a very rewarding hobby. Dabble, go for it. And there's lots of resources out there for you when you need it.
And Julia, what's Charlie's famous quote?
Relax, don't worry, have a homebrew.
All right. Hey, we're going to take a short break. We'll be back in a few minutes on Beer Sessions Radio. Thanks so much, Julia. We'll be back in a few minutes. Woo!
Bye-bye, everybody.
You too. Bye-bye.
This episode is brought to you by Roberta's, home of Heritage Radio Network for 10 years. Roberta's was founded in Bushwick in 2008 and has become one of the most iconic restaurants in the country. HRN made its home inside of Roberta's in 2009, and together they have become part of the DIY fabric of the neighborhood. Roberta's, the pizza restaurant, is open for lunch and dinner 7 days a week and serves much more than just the famous wood-fired pizzas. Their team dreams up new salads, pastas, and sandwiches on the regular. Roberta's Tiki Bar is alive and well in the back garden, serving up frozen drinks in the summer and hot toddies in the winter. Stop by the bakery and takeout spot next door for fresh breads, sticky buns, and pizzas to go. And of course, there's the 2 Michelin-starred Blanca tucked away in the garden for truly daring diners. But Roberta's also extends beyond Bushwick, with multiple locations in New York City and now in Los Angeles. You can also find their frozen pies in grocery stores around the country. The spirit of Roberta's, like Heritage Radio Network, is everywhere. Here's to many more years of pizza-powered radio. Learn more about Roberta's at robertaspizza.com.
Hey, welcome back to Beer Sessions Radio on Heritage Radio Network. Become a member and support us at heritageradionetwork.org. Wow, guys, we got Ethan Cox and Jeff Lyons, and we just got to talk with Julia Herz now she's the executive director of the American Homebrew Association. That's pretty cool. Do either want to say something about Julia or about her role? Because for so long she was at the Brewers Association. She was out there doing so much education. I know she had a book about pairing food and beer. It's kind of great to see her just jump into this other side of it. I don't know if anybody wants to.
I will say that, early in the pandemic, trade organizations, all of them across a lot of different sectors, had a problem on their hands, and the BA was no exception. There were a number of people who left the organization. She was one of them. And that was profoundly sad because of her role over all those years. She was very much the public face, or a public face, of beer and brewing. And so I'm super glad that she's found a way back in and a prominent way back in, and can continue to advocate so strongly for the beverage that we love. So I'm really, really glad to see her back. And I think that's a different role for her, and I think she will thrive at it.
One of my thoughts just coming into the show is that, there's so much pressure on, commercial breweries right now to, whether they're doing hard seltzer or other versions that I don't necessarily consider a beer, and I'm not going to judge that. But I do think that with Julia being head of the American Homebrew Association, and she was talking about styles, I feel like that people do have a hunger to try different styles of beer. And I feel like that there's going to be this next generation of people that are going to be able to really experience different beer styles. I don't know, Jeff, what do you think of how's homebrewing compared to like working in a brewery, and, the amount of exploration, because those little competitions and clubs you're part of, what are some of the styles that people are making?
I think that's some of the beauty of homebrewing is the wide range that you see. I think when you go to a homebrew meeting or a homebrew, festival or competition, I think you see a much wider range of styles represented than you do if you just walk into an average brewery tap room in this country. And I think that's one of the beauties of those events, but it's also every single person that we can encourage to homebrew. I think that the world of beer opens up to them instead of just having hazy IPA after hazy IPA. I think often when you get involved with homebrewing, you quickly find how wide that world is, and you start to find appreciation for at least a couple of the styles. And then, bit by bit, you kind of grow into appreciating a pretty wide array of beer. And so, as a brewer and as a brewery owner, I I would love it if every person that walked into my tap room had homebrewed, just for that simple fact of a little bit deeper appreciation of maybe what it takes to create what ends up in the glass. It's not just magic; it's an agricultural product, and a little bit of knowledge of how that happens and the work that goes into it, but also just a wider appreciation of varied styles.
Yeah. Hey, Ethan, we started talking, I don't know, a month or so ago about making a beer together, and you were really adamant about making it an all New York State beer.
Yes. Well, there's all kinds of reasons. Certainly, one, I mean, we're from New York State, Jeff and I, and so of course we love our native industry, and that includes now native input, which has really come a long way. Historically, New York actually did supply first a little bit of malt, but that changed pretty quick. There are definitely sort of more ideal places to grow large amounts of barley. But New York State also, up until around the late 1800s, was the main place where hops were grown in the U.S. That industry also kind of went away because when they got out to the Pacific Northwest and the yields were like twice as much per acre, it doesn't really do your prices very well back in New York State. So, but it's nice to see both of those things returning. So New York State barley getting malted in New York State, and New York State hops, including varietals that eventually we will have varietals that are, exclusive to New York State. So yeah, I think for Jeff as well as for myself, there is a desire to promote what we've got. And I think what we've got is pretty special. And it is unique. It can't be replicated elsewhere because terroir matters. So that's one of the main reasons. Of course, I wear many hats, ha ha ha. And right now I'm wearing my New York State Brewers Association hat. I served on the board for the New York State Brewers Association for 9 years. I stepped down from my board position in December. Was my last meeting after 9 years. It's a little weird actually to miss a meeting. But advocating for New York State is what I've been doing in my spare time, whatever spare time that was, in my volunteer time. So, of course, when we started discussing the idea of putting a beer together, my first thought was, well, hey, we're all New Yorkers here. New Yorkers should think and drink New York.
Yeah. And then, Jeff, tell us about Endless Life Brewing. Are you only making beers with New York State ingredients?
Yep. So we're 100%. We're fortunate enough to have come to be at a time where that was not only possible but exciting to be able to play with all the different flavors that are unique to what's available to us in New York. Is it's been a blast. It's been fun. It's been a learning curve, but it's always enjoyable. And I think that we're the quality is increasing at a pretty incredible rate, and the opportunities to sort of let those flavors dictate where your beers go. I think is very fun, very enjoyable, and I think we're not far from basically creating some new styles just because of some of the flavors that are available to us that anybody not using New York ingredients isn't going to have at their fingertips.
Oh yeah, no, looking forward to it. Hey, a separate thing. Let's talk about recipe inspiration. So, Ethan, we were talking about a Yule or a holiday beer. What's the style of beer that's like one of your favorites, or that you like to make or drink? Is it a barley wine?
If you know, and if you know me, I love barley wine. It is my favorite style. It is probably not the beer I drink the most of because barley wine. But I love it for its richness and depth of character. When you can load up the mash tun with everything like that, you can really crank out a very complex beer that is a nice warming because of the alcohol, but also like a sipping beer, a beer that you can savor, and a beer that's just great for a cold night, especially if you can get your feet up by a fire while you enjoy it. And then that's really what I love so much about that style. But yeah, obviously at 10, 11, 12, oh, nice, 13% ABV, those are not, session beers, right? And I certainly have a great love for beers at the lower end of the ABV spectrum as well, because, those are the beers that you can drink a few of. Oh, beautiful. Hey, I know
Jeff,
that.
wait, don't forget, Jeff, you may be on video, but this is an audio show. So
sorry, right.
You just held up a couple of things. What are you holding up, Jeff?
Tell us more.
Well, I'm at home and my beer fridge is right behind me, and he gets to talking about barley wine, and I wanted to see what I had available. So I have a bottle from Willow Rock and a couple cans from Torch and Crown, some barrel aged barley wine. Yeah.
Yeah, I those are great beers. I mean, I love the style. What can I say?
Yeah. So let's pretend that Julia will come back. Let's say the three of us get together, and we're going to make you guys are going to make it. I'm just going to watch and drink it, but some kind of homebrew collab. It could be a small batch collab at one of your breweries. How do you get started? That's always one thing we were talking, Ethan, you pulled up an old Ron Pattison book with a ingredient list.
Mm-hmm.
How do you look at a recipe and think about the beer you might want to make? Sure.
I mean, often you start with a style that you want to make, and that's going to start delineating, some of the malts, some of the hops, possibly the yeast. Once you start considering, well, when the beer is complete, I would like people to say it's this style. Okay, well, if people are gonna agree that it is this style, then certain things are probably going to have to be true, unless you're saying, oh well, I want to make a variation on this theme, and that's another direction that you can go in. But for me, most often it starts by deciding on a style, and then we start kicking around the ideas of the traditional ingredients, and then maybe we start kicking around the ideas of, well, how can we subvert that and make, a variation on the style or make it more our own. And that can be anything from substituting New York State, for example, ingredients where, you might have to use German ingredients to normally make a really, really awesome Helles, but what can we do with New York State input? I think we could probably make a pretty awesome Helles, honestly. Considerations usually around style are where I begin. ABV can be the very next level, although that often is tied to the style. But if you want to make something imperialized, or if you want to make a session version of something, then you start, figuring out, okay, well, I got to change my grain bill, the amount of base malt or whatever it is I'm doing, if I want to hit a particular gravity. Yeah.
And what about for you, Jeff?
We're actually just real quickly, Ethan. We're making a Helles tomorrow, an Endless Life all New York ingredient Helles. So we're using some malt from Ted at New York Craft Malt and some hops from Chris Holden at New York Hop Guild. Jimmy, two of the people that we had on last time I was on your show.
Oh, that was a great show too. I will say one thing about the show that's very encouraging is that I am a little tired. I feel bad for some beer and alcohol writers because they seem like they can only cover these big stories about acquisitions and problems in human, HR departments and other things. And I just like that I feel like with Julia, with her new job, I feel like everything she says is going to come true, that there are millions of people that want to or can make beer, and they're going to explore styles, and we're not going to have to worry about, can I walk into a pub and get the choice of a triple and a farmhouse German wheat and a Helles and something else, It's kind of like going to both of your places. So what's behind you, Jeff? I want to point out Endless Life because you really just opened last year, and I had your Mexican style lager. That's called, what is that called?
The Para Siempre.
Yeah, and I had that with some clams. That was one of my beers of the summer. Is there any other beer you want to give a shout out to, just as a style?
I love lambic style beer, and I absolutely love Saison probably above all else. And we not too long ago just released a barrel aged Saison that's tasting incredible. So every time I'm at the tap room, it's hard to I have to push myself to try other beers when I'm there, instead of just the go-to is just autopilot straight to the Saison.
Well, I just want to say to Jeff that I'm so happy for you. I've known you as a home brewer and brewer, and you worked in a couple other great breweries over the years. Really looking forward to trying more Endless Life and seeing where you go with it. And Ethan, it's our first time talking. Back to the Whale and Community Beer Works. We'll do a quick one. Early story from starting that brewery and brand, and you're up in Buffalo, so not as many people in New York City knew about you. But when I tried your beers at the New York State event, you were on my map right away.
Thanks. I remember it well, actually, because it was a bit of a frustrating day for me. Our distributor, let's just say there were some hiccups. I will name no names. But instead of having 2 beers on tap, I was only able to have 1 beer on tap, and it was the Whale. So that meant I didn't have a hoppy beer to offer. And already, even at that time, hops were becoming, sort of more of a thing. It wasn't quite, heady topper yet, but hops were still a thing. And I felt, oh no, here I am representing, and all I've got is this brown ale. I love it. I believe in it, but who am I going to convince? And the answer turned out to be Jimmy.
I did like it. Yeah, it was memorable, but that's a good story. And then another one. So when you started out, you're in Buffalo. We've talked to a couple guys like Mike from Thin Man.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, what you make a lot of beer for sports. Is there a way to define Buffalo as a brewer?
I don't think that there has emerged yet a real Buffalo style. I don't know that there is like anything that you can really call a Buffalo style IPA or anything really yet. That may yet happen, but we definitely have some really great breweries cranking out a pretty decent variety of stuff. And I'd love for something to emerge, but it's going to have to be organic. I don't think we can sit around and plan it out. But I think maybe the day will come when, kind of out of the scene, something that's really just ours could happen. I'd love to see that. We certainly have enough breweries and enough creativity in brewing for me to see that possibly happening, but I don't think it really has quite yet.
Yeah. All right, guys. This is such a great little show. We could talk more, but I think we did it. I really wanted to get Julia on, and so happy that you guys were able to join in, and hopefully like what a lot of these shows lead to more relationships. And I hope that Julia does come out east. I know she will, and hopefully she stops off in Buffalo and Brooklyn and sees you guys. So thanks so much for joining me. Anything last to say, Jeff? Because I'm just like, when you're parched and you're like, I just want one of Jeff's lagers right now.
Yeah. Nice.
So, thanks for that. Well, I think just real quickly to continue on Ethan's train of thought there, I think locally we're blessed with a really wide variety of breweries and beer styles across the city. But, I obviously working with 100% New York ingredients, I have Jason Saylor to tip my hat to, who was sort of the OG locally for us. And Alex Biederman, who's the head brewer over there, has been doing some incredible things. And I really think that they're sort of on the precipice of starting to break through into a little bit of new territory there, where, it was just excellent beer that was pretty much to style. And I think that particularly with sort of their pub ales, like beers inspired by British, like bitters, ESBs, best bitters, things of that nature. I think they have one or two that are staying true, and I think they have one or two that seem to be pushing a little bit in the directions that we were talking about earlier, where those New York ingredients are allowing beers to become something new. and forging new ground. So I think locally, that's who I look to sort of put a new foot forward for all of us to be inspired by.
Strong Rope is absolutely awesome, making great stuff.
Yeah. Hey, what are you drinking, Ethan?
So I figured it would be a sort of a good. I didn't have a regular whale on hand, but I do have Choco Taco whale. It's one of the whale variants that we made, and yes, it literally involved a bunch of waffle cones in the mash, and it emulates the flavor of a Choco Taco pretty well, to be honest. And coming in at, I'm going to forget the ABV. Let me just look real quick. Oh, 7.8. It's a little stiffer than normal whale as well, but it holds up. It brings the beer together. I mean, much like a good rug brings the room together.
A good rug. I love that one. And I've been in Boston area. I'm drinking some Notch.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, he actually has a session IPA, even though we mostly drink his lagers. And what are you drinking, Jeff?
I have one of Endless Life's Kolsch's. It's called Construed to Waste Your Time. And it's about half the size of what Ethan's drinking, which is where I like to keep it in the very sessionable range.
Wow. Oh, man. I wish we were in person, and we will be again. So thanks so much, guys. Thanks to Armin, our engineer. Thanks to Julia, Jeff, and Ethan for joining me here on Beer Sessions Radio. We'll catch you next time on Heritage Radio Network. All right, guys. Woo!
Beer Sessions Radio is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. For our freshest content, subscribe to our newsletter. Enter your email at the bottom of our website, heritageradionetwork.org. Connect with us on Instagram and Twitter at heritage_radio. You can also find us at facebook.com/Heritage Radio Network. Heritage Radio Network is a nonprofit organization driving conversations to make the world a better, fairer, more delicious place. And we couldn't do it without support from listeners like you. Want to be part of the food world's most innovative community? Subscribe to the shows you like. Tell your friends, and please join the HRN family by becoming a member. Just click on the beating heart at the top right of our homepage. Thanks for listening.